YouTube, Matt here from Science Fiction Reads with something I wanted to do for quite a while. We are going to do a library tour of vintage science fiction. It's going to be probably a lengthy, rambling video. I'm going to just talk about whatever books pop out to me or catch my attention as I'm going through the shelves. Talk about a decade of collecting and reading in general, and probably how my tastes have changed. So yeah, this could be a long one, but let's get into it. I moved about a year and a half ago, and for a while the library was in a bedroom, but it wasn't big enough. So I moved to the basement, and let's get into it. So we'll descend into the library, which half library, half eBay storage. But here's a general look. When you first get down here, I just put this up today. I got this, 2 days ago at the Toronto Public Library. I think on the 3rd floor is the Merrill Collection of Science Fiction. And I was together with some other booktubers and sat through an amazing presentation and saw some amazing books and stuff. But all right, like I said in the title of the video, I've been reading and collecting science fiction now for about 10 years. I think it was 2015 I really started reading as an adult. So I was 25 when I first started reading regularly. And I read a few Stephen King books and maybe one science fiction book. And I kind of just realized that science fiction might be something I was interested in. And it certainly expanded from there. So let's go through a couple sections first. Obviously the big thing and my main love is mass market paperbacks. And most of these are vintage, of course. But we'll go through the paperbacks and we'll go through the hardcovers. First, let's just kind of go around the room and some of the other sections I have set aside. First of all, this side of the room here is just, it's all eBay related. Everything here is stuff I have listed on eBay, and then packing materials and boxes. I try very hard not to ever buy boxes. I think I've only bought boxes twice. That's like a pack of 40 I bought, but usually it's just stuff that would normally be recycled, I just use. Same as packaging and stuff from Amazon, I reuse all the time. Got just a bunch of books here. This is the last of what's left from this massive amount of books I got in Ottawa. It was about 1,000 books. And this is what hasn't been donated, sold, listed to eBay, or put on my shelves. And I'm still periodically going through it and finding something that I'm like, that actually does sound interesting. I think I'll keep that. And you know, since this is my room, basically, Brianne graciously let me just take over the basement. I've put up a lot of my childhood nostalgia and stuff. And then this too, everything here, there's a couple Lego sets, but for the most part, it's just all books. All of this is just books listed to eBay. However, this here is just stuff of my own. I have, 2 boxes of paperbacks that I just don't have on the shelves because I don't have space for absolutely everything. So stuff that's really not too impressive, not too exciting, or I'm not sure of, it's still in boxes. I got 1 box of hardcovers for the same reason, and then 2 bins of vintage magazines, which we could take a look at. So the magazines are basically just grouped together. So all the amazings would be in one spot. A lot of them came from just one particular source all at one time, but I do pick them up here and there separately. Don't have many that are any older than the mid-50s. lot of startling stories here. I wanted to sell some of these. A lot of these that are in plastic I wanted to sell, but I bought them from an antique store, and I bought them online first, and I went to pick them up, and it was after I picked them up I realized they all smell like paint thinner or something. And I tried putting them in containers with baking soda for weeks, and it made no dent in the smell, so I don't think I can resell them, so they're just sitting there bagged. This side, it looks like it's all Fantastics. And like, it's not that many, but it's enough that I really don't know what I have. You could pick out any of them and probably be shocked by what I find in there. We've got some Vertex magazines, which I had never heard of before. Oh, it's all sorts of different stuff. One of the Vertexes has an interesting interview with Philip K. Dick in it. I think this is the Demolished Man, probably the first appearance, January 1952. Again, that was one I bought sight unseen, I think, because I wanted to sell it, but it smells. I think this one, there's a lot of just random old magazines, plus some Galaxies. The Last of the Masters, PKD. Yeah, like you don't know what you're gonna find. A.E. Van Vogt on Dianetics. Those I probably had stacked in such a way for a reason. And this side looks like fantasy and science fiction and analog. And these authentics are neat. I only have 3 or 4 of these. I don't even see a year for these. I would think 50s. Either I'm blind or it's just not there. But yeah, those are neat. I like the art style. And yeah, I don't know what's in here. It's fun to just pick through and leaf through them. 1951 Astounding. Then this is the table I use for, sorting books that are going to go on eBay, or anytime I buy a bunch of new books, spread them out here, do some research, decide what I'm keeping, what I'm going to sell. There's a stack of stuff that'll probably go onto eBay as a lot. Over here, I have a couple things just pulled aside, usually, like James Gunn's The Listeners. I'm going to buddy read this with Ira and then do a video talking about it on his channel sometime this month, I believe. A recent obsession of mine is Ross Rocklin, who wrote a lot of short stories in the 40s, 50s, 60s. I really became obsessed with him when I read a few anthologies recently, and some of his short stories were in there. So I tracked down this book of his. And then some of my anthologies, I managed to find stories of his in here. So each of these has one of his stories. So I've pulled them from the shelves because I want to read them and then maybe do a video about Ross Rocklin. And yeah, there's some stuff in the middle there. I'm sure we'll get to that. The hardcovers are over here. So they start here, they go down. Then when you get over here, they don't actually continue until right here. Because up here I've got a specialty shelf where all my Neil Ashers are, all the Clifford Simacs, and then a free shelf up top. I just stuck some random stuff up there for now, but they won't last long because I'll do some rearranging, I'm sure, and they'll be covered with books. But yeah, let's get into it. We'll start with some of the specialty shelves. So this is all reference books. And I only recently expanded. I brought this cabinet down. I put this here. I put a couple shelves up here. Before that, anytime I bought books that it turned out they're in very poor condition or they're falling apart, they can't be resold, they basically just have to be chucked, I'd rip the cover off first and I just pin them to the wall. So there's a huge just collage of those, but they're mostly buried behind stuff now. Eventually I'll take them down and maybe put them around somewhere else. But for the most part, all that beautiful cover art is covered up right now. But I think I found both of these at separate places in Toronto. I was recently living in Toronto for a short period. These are awesome. I use the website. I still never grabbed one of these off the shelf. I always just use the website, but these are amazing to have. Then a more recent publication all about John W. Campbell and Astounding. It came out a few years ago from Alec Nivalali. This is really cool. This is a DAW reference book. I thought about filming this with a tripod, but I think it's just going to be too tricky, so I'm going to sacrifice stability for less editing and having to put things down and stuff. But I can only use one free hand. But this is pretty cool. I've shown this off before. It's just a way of tracking down, you know, which DAW you have, which edition, information about it, the cover artist and everything. So it's pretty neat. And this is really cool. This is from Hippocampus Press, which is an awesome publisher. I bought, there's letters here from Lovecraft to other people like Fritz Leiber and a little bit to Kuttner. But I bought this for the letters from C.L. Moore because I love C.L. Moore, and it was incredibly interesting to read. Like, it's almost all C.L. Moore stuff. And that's all I read, and the Kuttner. It was really cool just to read C.L. Moore talking to one of her heroes back and forth, and just seeing her write about herself and her life, and just casually mentioning that her fiance accidentally shot himself while cleaning a gun, and now she's taking a road trip with her mother, and she'll let HP know where she is when she settles down somewhere for a while, and she'll get back to him. Just insane stuff like that, and just musings of this young woman who wasn't yet such a huge name in science fiction. I love C.L. Moore. Yeah, there's lots of neat stuff. It's taken years to find these things. This is another really cool reference book that lots of people will mention on booktube. Frederick Pohl's The Way the Future Was. I'm really looking forward to checking this out. I have it in paperback as well. Just really cool insights about the early days of science fiction and the people involved. And then science fiction criticisms. These are actually written by James Blish. I had these on eBay for a couple of years until I read The Best of James Blish with Ira at SF Words of Wonder and Richard at Vintage SF. And I realized, oh man, James Blish is amazing. I think I might keep his criticisms and reviews and stuff. Check these out because those will be pretty neat. This was a old review magazine. I found this in Germany on eBay specifically because I wanted to read up about Raymond Ziegler, who I'm sure I'll talk about later, because there's an interview in here with him, and I still haven't read it, which is often the case. By the time the book arrives, you've moved on. But I do look forward to learning more about Raymond Ziegler. And yeah, just a lot of similar stuff, a lot of, you know, landmark books lots of people have in their collections. These are pretty cool. Move this guy. I've got a book here from Steve, the Outlaw Bookseller. This is his reference novel, signed to me, which is really cool. These I'll probably pull out in a couple weeks when I read the listeners, talk to Ira, because I don't have a lot of James Gunn books, but these are really neat, just involving the history of science fiction. I think there was one, maybe two more of these written later, but I've got this nice old box set. And speaking of Ira and Richard, we had a series going for a couple years reading these best ofs from Ballantine and Del Rey, and that series of videos is just on pause until my health improves and I actually feel like doing it again. But these came out in paperback. Every one of these, there was like 21. They're all in like Del Rey, Ballantine paperbacks, and then most of them were released in book club editions too. And these all have just incredible cover art, which, because I've wrapped them all in Brodart dust jackets, you don't really get to see them properly. They're amazing. I found this, I think, in Calgary, and it's in rough shape, but once you wrap it, it's like it's brand new. Most of these are from that series. I believe these two are not. This was kind of pricey, but I bought it as a gift to myself a couple years ago. A Nesfa Press. It was unopened, still shrink wrapped, because I think it's from the early 2000s. The Best of James Schmitz, which is an incredibly underrated author from the 60s and 70s. This has some great stuff, some great stories. I wouldn't say it's his absolute best, but you know, when they say best of, it's more like what hasn't been published 100 times already and what can we get the rights to. But Nesfa Press, they are really cool, and they often have awesome cover art as well. I'm gonna be spending a long time after this is done putting everything back together. I've mentioned this book in the past. Who wrote this? William Porter, The Legacy of Man. A book and an author nobody's heard of, but I just loved the cover art, and some little Lego rocket I built years ago in front of it, but I just thought that was amazing, simplistic but amazing looking cover art. I've never read it because it looks and seems like a really bad military SF, but there it is. I have to display it because it looks so cool. And then an entire run of these anthologies from Da, the annual World's Best SF. I found most of these all at once at a book sale, and then I tracked down the rest. They're all book club editions. They all came out in Da paperbacks, but what year is it? 1970? 79 was the only year, for some reason, there was no book club, so I had to track down the paperback version. But otherwise, that's a complete set. Aside from the fact that I don't have a 1973 copy with a dust jacket. I think those are the only anthologies not collected with the rest of my anthologies, but they're right next door. So then we get to the anthologies, which everything's alphabetical, I think, from this point on. But I did the paperbacks alphabetically, and then the hardcovers. And of course, some are missing because they have Ross Rockland stories, and I want to go through those. So again, we've got some familiar stuff that lots of people have in their collections, like Aldis's The Science Fiction Omnibus. This is a neat Penguin science fiction collection that Aldis edited. And then the Great SF Stories, edited by Asimov. I want to find as many of these as I can. So far, I've only got 2. Lots of Asimov here. Some of these are out of order, alphabetically speaking, because these were actually edited by Greenberg. They just have Asimov's name on them. I just haven't moved things around. I have these excellent Before the Golden Age books, 1, 2, and 3, but I think down below I've also got a hardcover of those. Then the Hugo stuff, I think I have all of these. Volumes 1, 2, 2 again. Oh, because it's more stories, so a slightly different title. Yeah, I don't know if I have all of those. Destinies, there's a lot of these from James Bain. I have another one sitting behind me. I might start collecting those whenever I find them cheap. And yeah, this another landmark series, the Science Fiction Hall of Fame anthologies. Haven't read those, but I've read a lot of the stories that are in them, just in other places. These two, not in good shape. I think I had ones in better shape and I accidentally sold them. And I mixed them up. I sold the good ones or something. I've got some of these new writings from John Carnell I've started collecting. These are paperbacks. I've got 1, 7, 8, and 9. But a few of these that I have were rebound as hardcovers. And I just got curious about some of the stuff in here. The Ontario Training Centre in Brantford, and then this Monteith Library. And then there's some other, these are in terrible shape. The Millbrook bookbinding. I got curious about this. I looked it up. It turns out there was a program in Ontario, I don't know, in the 60s, 70s, I think even earlier, where prisoners, one of the activities they got to do was bookbinding. And I think they even got paid a little bit for it. So I believe the 3 of these I have that were turned into hardcovers were bound by inmates, I think, if my research is correct. They're not in great shape, but I kept them anyway. And I just discovered that yesterday when I was looking through these and I started researching those stamps and stuff. I think that's the case, and it just adds to, you know, these particular copies' personal story. Best science fiction of the year. I've got a bunch of those from Terry Carr. And then I always mention these in book hauls. These anthologies by Jack Dan and Gardner Dozois are just excellent. These guys are great anthologists. I can't remember what I've read now. I believe I read Beyond Singularity, and they were great. And it must have been Beyond Flesh I read as well, which is kind of similar themes, really, but lots of great stories. Those were hard SF, but, you know, everything from hard SF type stuff to fantasy stories or dinosaur stories, most of which are, I think, time travel. Then I got a few of the Omni stuff. I've started collecting the Judy Lindell Ray anthologies. I believe she did 8 of these. I have 4. One is a hardcover, and one of the paperbacks I have to pick up from a friend I bought it off. And then this is a curio I acquired in that massive bunch of books I bought in Ottawa. I was going to resell these, but they just seemed so interesting. I've never heard anybody talk about them, but it's just a series of anthologies. Men hunting things, things hunting men, and then men hunt things, things hunt men, men and things hunt together. So it's a fun theme. Hunting-related SF stories, especially the ones from like the 30s and 40s, are awesome because they're basically just, you know, stories of people hunting in Africa or in the outback, you know, transported, touched up with a science fiction setting. There's a book I'm going to talk about when we get to it, if I remember, that's kind of like that. These just sounded fun, so I've kept them. But who's the kind of people in here? Henry Kuttner, A.A. Van Vogt, Silverberg, Ellison, Smits. Green Face by James H. Schmitz is a bizarre story. It's creepy, and I think it's the first story he wrote or the first story he sold, and it's very atypical of his usual stuff. It's not his usual type of thing. But yeah, I've just confirmed for myself looking at these that these were worth keeping because that's a great lineup of authors. Again, I'll probably just put everything away later. Dangerous Visions. I've only got, again, Dangerous Visions Volume 2. I think I had the first volume of, again, Dangerous Visions, but it fell apart in my hands, so I kept the cover, chucked the rest. More Greenberg anthologies. He's another great anthologist. England Swings SF. This one seems interesting. Oh, I've got it wrapped, so I can't really look through it. I'm looking forward to checking that out sometime. Edited by Judith Merrill, of course, and I was just at her, you know, collection at the Toronto Public Library. I just read this collection of stories with edited by Sam Moskowitz, and that is where I read a Ross Rockland story that blew my mind. I absolutely loved it. It was great. Can I find it? Yes, At the Center of Gravity. It's like a hard SF physics puzzle, and it was written in the 40s, and it was really good. And some of the math and science was later disproved very quickly, but it was still really well thought out and just fantastic. These are cool. 2 volumes edited by Pohl and a few others. 30 Years of Galaxy. I think I had them and sold them and kind of regretted it, and then I came across them again, so I kept them. Lots of randoms. Just in the last year, I've really become enamored with old anthologies. So it used to be I just had a lot of, the typical anthologies everyone has, like these and stuff edited by Silverberg and stuff. But lately I've been picking up just randoms and throwing them in there because you find absolute gold. I mean, Moskowitz isn't a random, but you can find stuff that really changes your trajectory in reading. And then I've got a lot of these. Well, first of all, there's Mere Shades, like the quintessential cyberpunk anthology. I've got a lot of these Nebula Award stories that came in a big book haul, which was a gift to me. Somebody found a bunch of books for very cheap and gifted them to me, and I went through them on video, and we discovered, the viewers and I, that they'd been chewed on by mice and stuff. That's why these are all wrapped, despite being in terrible condition. I mean, you can't sell them. I wouldn't put them beside my books if they weren't wrapped, but they're full of good stories, so they're placeholders until I replace them with better copies, or at the very least I'll read them and chuck them or something. But I have so many of them, and I got a couple more I bought from Norm at the bookstore in Pluto, or at least one that I'm waiting to pick up, and it'll go into the collection. Then we get on to the hardcovers. I already pointed out I had these 3 in paperback, but it's cool to have the big, funky looking book club, I believe it is. Great 2-book collection from Aldous, Galactic Empires. This has some really neat old stories in it. As does probably this lesser known collection, Space Opera. I can't wait to check this out because I love old space opera. This is an old book. Is this a book club? It is. And probably maybe the most popular, most famous anthology is this Anthony Boucher? Yeah, this 2-book collection of his, which came out, I think in the 50s, 49 maybe. These are book club copies that came out later. They're not first editions or anything. This is my 3rd set of these. Over the years, I've found them 3 times, and each time I found them, they were in better condition. So I just kept upgrading. This is a really cool one I look forward to reading. Elsberg de Camp's Warlocks and Warriors, basically sword and sorcery. I just read an anthology of his that was absolutely excellent. We would have passed it. It was called The Spell of Seven. It's further up. This was really, really good. Like an all-star lineup of stories was in this. There is I think this might be the only copy of her stellar anthologies that was turned into a book club. So I'd rather have it in paperback. So if I ever find it, I'll replace it and probably sell this. But this is in great condition with some funky art. This is a neat one, edited by Harry Harrison, and it's the John W. Campbell Memorial Anthology. So let's see who is in here. if these were written after he passed, or if they were just selected for this collection. I'm thinking some of them at least were selected, because I'm not sure if Alfred Bester was still alive by this point. Maybe. I'm not, you know, despite 10 years of book collecting and reading, I'm not all that knowledgeable compared to a lot of other people here on BookTube. Another great anthologist is David G. Hartwell, along with, I think, his wife, Catherine Kramer. These two collections are amazing. The Evolution of Hard SF and the Hard SF Renaissance introduced me to a couple new to me authors like Robert Reed. I think James B. Hogan had a story in one of those that was also really good. And moving down, another one that a lot of people might be familiar with, Damon Knight's A Science Fiction Argosy. And just, you know, lots of other randoms. These two great collections from Silverberg. This one has a great story in it. If it's the copy I'm thinking of, there's a great Henry Kuttner story in here. Yeah, called Private Eye, which Ira introduced me to, and that was an excellent, excellent story. Incredible. And it has Arthur C. Clarke's Rescue Party, which was also one of my favorite short stories, although I haven't read that in probably nearly a decade. And James H. Schmidt's Grandpa, that's a great one too. Yeah, lots of amazing stuff in these. And then I had these four Silverberg collections on eBay for a few years. Nobody bought them, so I took them off because they're so awesome. They'll probably end up back on eBay eventually, these old book clubs, but they're just really neat. All right, and that is that's the anthologies. But I think before we move on to the paperbacks and the hardcovers, we'll just go through some of these other specialty areas. Like I said, this shelf up here, I don't have anything on it yet. Probably everything's just going to move up one. These floating shelves are terrible for too much weight, and of course books are too much weight. So I've just put some random stuff up here. A lot of people be familiar with the Terran Trade Authority stuff. This Challenge the Stars hardcover just has some amazing art in it. And then this was made by my late great friend Sean Standfast. Just with the use of AI, it just depicts me rescuing a bunch of ladies from some aliens. So that's not an Amazing Stories issue you'll find anywhere else. But yeah, this is pretty cool. Just has lots of incredible art. It was a good read. Kind of like presenting how it could be done, how we could get places. And I'm not going to get that back up. Then Neil Asher, one of my favorite contemporary authors, writes hard SF, space opera, cyberpunk, all in one. The only reason he has his own shelf is because these larger trade paperbacks really don't fit great with the mass markets. And since I have so many, I just gave him his own shelf. Usually, I'm about 1 or 2 books behind from having everything he's written, because I wait until they come out in this smaller format. But during COVID, he self-published a bunch of stuff, Now you can get these collections with much better art, like this, and they all come looking like this now. But in the early days of I think COVID, he was just self-publishing stuff, so I scooped all that up. All his awesome novellas. It's one of the harder to find stuff about it's very cyberpunk, post-apocalypse, but taking place in Africa, which is really fun. And again, during COVID, he released these Lockdown Tales, most of which were like taking place in the far future of the polity after the universe he's worked on for 20 plus years has just fractured and faded away from memory, and there's still life in the galaxy in these stories, but it doesn't really remember anything from this, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I've got all of the polity books except maybe the latest one or two, which is everything you're seeing up until about there. And then a couple of his, a standalone, and then one of his trilogies. And yeah, the gore and the high tech in his stuff is just so much fun. And then I've got the Clifford Simak shelf in honor of my friend Sean Standfast, who introduced me to, well, he didn't introduce me to Simak, but he greatly expanded my Simak reading. I think I had read City and Way Station before I met Sean, and we got to talking, and now I have everything is Simak's, aside from probably some short stories. Obviously, I don't think all his short stories are collected in the collections I have here. There are collections with all his short stories, but they're scarce and very expensive. And there he is right there. And thanks to his friend Aaron, who dealt with Sean's affairs after he passed, I was able to actually get Sean's actual special copies of City and Way Station. I just can't remember who put these out. OEB, Old Earth Books put these out in, I think, the early 2000s to mark the 100th birthday of Simak. So, and the funny thing is, Aaron was asking us, let me know what you would like from Sean's collection, a book or two, and I'll try and get it for you. And what I asked for, he wasn't able to get me, and he sent me these instead, and these are far better than what I had asked for. I couldn't believe he sent me these. Yeah, and you can see, Sean has a backlog, all these videos, all these years on YouTube. You can see him holding these up and talking about Simak with all the passion he had for this author. And there's still a group of us. Well, I won't say us because I haven't joined any of the chats due to life and health issues, but there's still a group of Sean's friends reading Simak and talking once a month on YouTube about all those. And those two would be my favorite of his I've read, I don't know, maybe 10 of his books at this point, and it's still got to be Way Station and City are my favorites. And of course, I've got multiple copies. Got the book club. This is a book club too of City, and then some of the less easy to find stuff like this fiction book. He wrote 4 or 5, non-fiction books, and this is just a book about the solar system and science and physics written by him, which is pretty neat. I found that at Rereading in Toronto, which is a great bookstore. And I always try to point out and make people aware that Garth Marenghi's Dark Place is a thing that exists, and you can watch it on YouTube for free. If you like weird British comedy, it's up there. It's peak. I love it. And I've mentioned this before too. This is a poster advertising an obscure trilogy from an obscure author, William Tedford. He didn't write much, but I enjoyed the books, and then I found this poster, and I had to have it, so I framed it. And that would leave us with the fun stuff, the paperbacks, which is my main love. Old mass market vintage paperbacks of science fiction. Part of the benefit of moving downstairs was I got these 2 shelves that are built into the walls. Well, there's actually 3. So it's like extra shelf space, because these bookshelves aren't usually that cheap. So it wraps around alphabetically to about here. And then I've just left negative space at the bottom. So there's plenty of room and time to expand before I run into storage issues. So I think I'll take a break and then we'll get into the paperbacks. All right, mass market paperbacks, predominantly science fiction and predominantly vintage. So what's the very first one alphabetically? Flatland, from the late 1800s, early 1900s. And then some real curios, Inter Ice Age 4 from Kobo Abe. That's one I want to read. Very interesting international science fiction. Gil or Jill Alderman, is it? The Archivist sounds really good. This was a recommendation from Graham Bray, who appears on Steve the Outlaw Bookseller's channel. And boy, if there's one person I wish had their own channel, Graham's the one. The few times his collection has been shown, or just when he talks about books, especially the ones you've never heard of, his recommendations are great. And I'm always looking for books that he's recommended. Then, of course, some more familiar names. We've got lots of Aldous. Aldous is hit or miss with me. I've read lots of his short stories and I either love them or don't care for them whatsoever. Definitely the best thing I've read from him would be Hot House, which... Why can I not see it? Oh, there it is. I got 2 copies of Hot House, which is a fix-up novel of short stories, but it's really, really good about the far future, dying Earth. Humanity is shrunk and lives in trees and are preyed on by pretty much everything. There are giant spiders that travel from Earth to the moon, and you can hitch a ride on them. And then I think there's a civilization on the moon. Really, really good stuff. Absolutely love this. Again, I think it's going to be a nightmare putting the shelves back together, but it'll make for a better video. So I've got lots of Aldous, lots of Poul Anderson. I have just a box of his books behind me that I don't want to devote shelf space to, because the guy was so prolific, and much like Aldous, I've read a lot of Anderson, and I either love it or don't care for it. Probably my favorite Anderson book so far would be Tau Zero, but I'm not seeing it. Oh, there it is, about a ship that something breaks and it just keeps increasing in speed until they're traveling so fast that time is going by so quickly they're going to reach the end of the universe, basically, in a matter of years. So yeah, I have lots of Anderson that I haven't even bothered putting on the shelves. Then Patricia Anthony, is she Canadian? I can't remember. Her short story is really, really good and literary, but very emotional and usually heartbreaking. I still haven't finished that. I read half of it last year. And of course, then we get to Asimov, who about 10 years ago when I was getting into science fiction, and you're a beginner just doing your research, read Asimov and Clarke. So I read lots of both of them, but it's been years since I've read anything other than a short story here or there by either of them. So I can't even remember entirely what I've read of Asimov now. I did enjoy the Foundation trilogy and some related books. A. Atanasio. His books are supposed to be really wild and mind-trippy. I believe these 4 are all part of one series. They're linked, but I don't think you have to necessarily read them in order. Works and Craig, that'd be the only Margaret Atwood I've read. Got The Best of J.G. Ballard, which would be a good one to read as an introduction to Ballard, because I haven't read anything by him yet. And occasionally you'll see a book that doesn't fit, but it belongs with the paperback, so it's downward. And that would be a Ian M. Banks culture book. And as we see, I've got all of them, or I might be missing one. Then there's 3 that don't fit because they're just a little bit taller. But it's been years again since I've read any Banks, but I read probably half the culture books, and you know, it's weird. You read something like that, and I'm like, this is some of the greatest stuff I've ever read, and then 5 years later, I still haven't read any more, but there's just too much to read. This I hinted at earlier. Interplanetary Hunter by Arthur Barnes. These were from the 40s and 50s, and they're just about this woman who goes hunting. I think her name's Callahan or Carlisle. She's famous for hunting on other planets for wildlife, basically wild alien life. And it's just stories about her. But it's weird. She's presented as like, I think in the foreword or something, or maybe online, she's presented as like a competent female, one of the early examples of this. But actually, she makes terrible decisions, and it's the guys in her crew that always save her, including the terribly named Tommy Strike. Yeah, the woman Carlisle makes some bad decisions and always needs to be rescued. But one of these, Almusin's Comet, was co-written with Kuttner. There's no credit in the book, but if you look up online, it was co-wrote with Kuttner, and it was really good. It was very cosmic horror-ish, and you could tell Kuttner was involved because it didn't fit with the rest of the stories. It had a different tone. The Ice People is a famous French novel from René Barvel. I can't pronounce, but that was good, about the last 2 people from an ancient Antarctica race, kind of like Lost Atlantis. There was a lost race, and they're the last members of it, and they're found, they're dug up, and they kind of tell their story of what happened. And in the background is a lot of international strife and the beginnings of war, and it's kind of like a cautionary tale. What happened to this ancient civilization is currently happening to our civilization. It was a good read, if not a little depressing. It wasn't quite what I thought it was going to be, but it was still good. I think when I finished it, I was disappointed, and I sold it, and then it just stuck with me, and I had to track it down and buy it again because it was better than I thought it was. T.J. Bass didn't write much, but he's known for Half-Mast Human and The God Whale. These 2 might be out of order, but they're related. Difficult read. I've tried it twice. The way he writes is difficult and challenging, but I think it'll be a rewarding read when I actually commit to finishing it. It's one of those people either love it or don't really get it. Stephen Baxter, another early influence of mine. Baxter blew my mind on countless occasions, especially with time, with what you could do with hard SF, speculative physics, and just speculative science fiction at its best, at least when you're talking about contemporary stuff. These are all related. These 3 books all tell a similar story about the Fermi paradox and what could be the reason for it. All involve the same characters, but in different timelines or slightly different dimensions. So all 3 books start the same, with a group of characters setting off for space, looking for intelligent life or something, and they all go in wildly different directions. So it's like the same story from 3 different timelines or dimensions. And then Phase Space is related short stories. I think some of the first Baxter I read was his Vacuum Diagrams. Where's that? The short story collection. which just blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind. A lot of his stuff is in the Zeely universe, which involves just super advanced physics and aliens, and I've read some stories and novels here and there, but I would really love to read that stuff in order, and how humanity spends a few millennia trying to defeat these all-powerful, enigmatic aliens. Really good stuff. This is going to be a long video. I think a less popular series, his Proxima and Ultima, about going to the nearest star and trying to settle there, and Obelisk, again, is a book of related short stories. I don't remember much. I remember people suffering on the planet, trying to survive, and then they find like circular doors in the ground, and they end up being portals to other worlds or something, which to me just seemed like he got halfway through the story and didn't know what to do, so he threw in a wild element. I was kind of disappointed with that. Haven't read Galaxius. It's a standalone, I believe. And then yet another Zeely novel, which I'll pick them up cheap when I find them, but I don't really know anything about the Zeely universe. It's been too long since I read that stuff. Another of my favorites, Barrington J. Bailey, someone who doesn't get enough recognition, although there's a lot of us raving about him on BookTube, and his stuff is getting reprinted. This is some of his books I got off Amazon. These are just reprints, obviously. I read his The Fall of Chronopolis, and it blew my mind with these two human empires fighting each other with time travel and alternate dimensions and stuff. Really cool. Greg Bear, another one of those pillars of modern hard SF. What was it? I loved Aeon. It was excellent. Blew my mind. I think I read the next one, Eternity. Or was it Legacy? I can't remember now. Since moving to this house, the books went from one bedroom to another bedroom and down to the basement. And those moves have mixed up, certainly, books within each author's section. You'll see books out of order. Sometimes, alphabetically, there's errors, too. I'm still finding mistakes that occurred during the reshelving. But I've got lots of Greg Bear and Gregory Benford. I haven't read a lot of Benford. I read the first couple of this series, the Galactic Center series or something, where they're slowly heading toward the center of the galaxy, and it was very engaging and interesting, but I lost interest when I read the books I had and was waiting for the others to come in the mail. And hopefully it was just because it was early on in my reading, but I struggled with the hard SF and the science. It made for hard reading for me, but I did enjoy them, and I need to get back to it. Then I've got some Alfred Bester, but so far I've only read his two big main novels, which I don't see here. I guess, yeah, I've got them in hardcover. And some Michael Bishop. I think the Michael Bishop I most want to read is Transfiguration, with a scientist going to another planet. There's kind of human-like aliens, and they're very enigmatic, and it's very much my kind of thing. Then some James Blish, who I've not read a lot of, but I read and loved The Best of James Blish, which has, and is depicted in the artwork, Surface Tension, probably his best-known short story, and one of the best short stories I've ever read. And on my channel is a discussion video with Richard and Ira about it, and we all loved that. And right beside it, The Best of Robert Bloch, which was the read we were supposed to do next. We all read it, and then my life got too busy and complicated, and we never got around to filming it. But hopefully one day, or even if we have to just give up on that one and move on to the next best of, that would be okay too. All right, that's one shelf. Let's keep going. Ben Bova. Haven't read a lot of him. I feel like I like his short stories better than his novels, but I read As on a Darkling Plain, which was an early short novel. and then mostly just short stories. Then I've got, I think, every Lee Brackett book there is, aside from one short story collection, and not including rare limited stuff. Like Hafner Press has, I think, 4 different books of her stories. I have one of them. But Lee Brackett, I love her. Her planetary romance is just excellent. I've put up a couple of videos where I use like AI art to retell her stories with myself as the narrator, kind of just because I got along with the stories so well. They're so imaginative. I felt like retelling them for YouTube, kind of. The Long Tomorrow, which I guess has a receipt I was using as a bookmark. I read that in Toronto. I loved it. It's a post-apocalypse novel, and basically people are kind of living very simple lives after that. A fear of technology, and one character's quest to find a town or a city that still embraces technology and the ways of the old days. And it was a beautifully told story. David Brin, one of the first SF books I read back in 2015 or 16 was Sundiver. And again, my mind was blown with the physics and the science. And I read Startide Rising, and I was really getting into the world, but I didn't keep going. So one day I'd like to revisit that whole universe. I couldn't even tell you at the moment if these 3 are related. I can't remember what these are. Oh yeah, okay, they're Uplift related, and they have excellent art. A few more David Brin and some Damien Broderick, who's has a reputation for difficult prose, I think, or difficult stories, but I've got a decent collection of his books now, so it's probably time to check him out. And Eric Brown as well. I think passed away a couple years ago. Celebrated space opera author of the UK, I believe. Slowly been collecting his books. I've got a bunch here, and I'm very much looking forward to checking him out. Roussel George Brown. I listened to a podcast called The Chrononauts. I was thinking maybe they spoke about this author. I think they were talking about someone else, but nonetheless, this is a less known, I believe, female author, and she has a character who appears in multiple books I was interested in checking out. Got the best of Frederick Brown. By the end of this, we'll have seen all the best ofs in the entire series. And then lots of John Brunner. I made the mistake of reading, for my first John Brunner, one of his, I think, more modern books. One of the ones later in his career, and I did not like it. And I think it was Total Eclipse. So I guess maybe not that early in his career if it's an old yellow Daub. But I did not care for this at all. But I'll give him a proper try and read one of his landmark books, like Stand on Zanzibar or something eventually. I've got this little model of Futurama's The Planet Express. I saw this on the shelf of a girl's, in the background of this girl, she's a booktuber, but I can't remember her name. And I had to have it, so I asked her about it, and I tracked one down. She always refers to herself as the Sporadic Booktuber. That could be the name of her channel, but I don't think it is. But it's pretty cool. It just goes on with a magnet. Sue Burke's Semiosis. It's an excellent contemporary novel about trying to survive on another world. And the planet is just fighting them back, it seems. And possibly some of the plant life is sentient. And they might have to learn to deal with this sentience. There's no beating it. They might have to get along with it or make deals with it, kind of thing. It was really good. And I have the sequel on the hardcover shelf. And, you know, tons of Edgar Rice Burroughs. I had most of his books. I got rid of all the Tarzan. I sold those. I've read the first 3 John Carter books, loved them. I love these old Del Rey books because the cover art is amazing. Probably one of my favorite cover artists. I can't remember his name now. Michael something. But he did the art for all of those, and they're amazing. And then there's this odd little John Flint Roy Guide to Barsoom, kind of a guidebook, which is pretty neat. And then, you know, I've got all the other science fiction from Burroughs and a couple other things. Then a bunch of F.M. Busby, who is, I don't think all that well known today, but I've heard from a few people that he's well worth checking out. Strong female characters in his books. He's got a long series here with this Arisa character. I recently got this, which takes place in that series. Possibly, maybe not, but what an amazing cover art. It's from Dell, so it's got the colored text block. Just a beautiful book. Octavia Butler, who I read a short story of hers in 2012. So even as far back as 2012, I was maybe subconsciously aware that science fiction was interesting to me. I think her short story is called Blood Child, and I immediately, I think I read it online, and I tracked down this omnibus of Lilith's Brood, which is her Xenogenesis trilogy, and I read that, and it was incredible, but I still didn't clue in that science fiction is my kind of thing until a few years later. Best of John W. Campbell and a bunch of his little ace copies there. And the Ender's Game books, which you probably can't tell, but I bought these brand new about 10 years ago, read them, and they're quite sun-faded. I don't think you can really tell, but it's, now that I'm in the basement, I look forward to the books I buy not fading from the sun. Not a big fan of Ender's Game. Speaker for the Dead was an excellent novel, and the following 2, I think I was okay with. I enjoyed them, but Ender's Game I didn't care much for. Then I have a lot of Lynn Carter, not known for his literary abilities, more of an anthologist and a pastiche writer, but I've got just a bunch of his stuff. And Jack Chalker. Well, I've got Robert W. Chambers' The King in Yellow, which is a landmark in weird fiction, and just in the last couple of years, after discovering C.L. Moore and Clark Ashton Smith, I've become quite the weird fiction fan. But I read the stories in this just recently that were the weird ones, because the other ones are kind of like romance, and I really didn't care for them. So I sold the vintage copy I had. If you're watching, Brian, hi, and thanks for purchasing the older copy. And then Jack Chalker, another guy not known for his literary ability, but he tells a fun story. I loved the Well of Souls books. These were so much fun. They're not well written, but they are a damn fun adventure with a lot of funky characters, lots and lots of different aliens that are all basically human in their temperament and mindsets, but somehow they're fun and charming. And so I just collect all his books now, which is probably not wise. I bet you if I picked out 3 of these, I might like one. He wrote a lot of series, but there's also a lot of standalones here. And then someone from the old days I want to check out is A. Bertram Chandler, and he had his Commodore Grimes character. I don't think all those stories are compiled here, but there is a lot of them in these 5 books that collect a bunch of the Grimes stories. And lots of C.J. Cherryh, again, somebody I read early on in my collecting, or my reading. I read her Morgaine stories, which are down here. Yeah. They start with Gate of Ivral. They're science fantasy. This was probably the first science fantasy book I read, and I read all 4 back to back, and I really enjoyed them. About this woman from well, you find out it's the far future. She's traveling from primitive planet to primitive planet, shutting down these stargates. You get the idea that all these worlds used to be connected by stargates, and they were all this part of this high-tech civilization, intergalactic, and something abused the use of the gates and destroyed civilization on all the worlds. And now most of the worlds are like feudal, medieval, you know, small empires bickering with one another, but the gates could still be operated and abused, and she's like on a mission from the last remnants of civilized civilization, and she's shutting them down. And in the first book, she meets this guy. Naivan Chaya, I think is his name. I haven't read that in like 10 years, but I bet you... I just love the way she said his name, and I'm pretty sure his name was Naivan Chaya. Anyway, he pledges himself to her, and they run around on horses, and, you know, it reads as fantasy, but in the background, it's science fiction. And they're awesome. So I read all of those. I think Gate of Ivral is signed, actually. Well of Cheyenne. And then later she ended it with Exile's Gate. They're really fun. I just want to check. Usually I have a little piece of paper in here that says signed, so I know it's signed. Now I'm wondering if I accidentally sold the signed one. Oh no, it's there. So she added the H to her name to sound more exotic. So at first, if you're thinking, well, it's not even spelled right, that is her name. And this was early on in her career. So I think later on she probably signed it with an H. But pretty cool. And then we get to the John Christopher, who No Blade of Grass, probably his best known novel, really great and bleak, very bleak post-apocalypse story. And then right beside it is The Long Winter, which is also a post-apocalyptic story, and it was almost beat for beat the same thing. And I know some of these other stories are they're post-apocalyptic, so I wonder if he wrote kind of the same thing multiple times because it did so well when he wrote No Blade of Grass. And then I've got a few, I don't think they were print on demand, but they're modern copies of his books. Sometimes up here, to divide these shelves, like this is just a brick of Lego, or I'll use a DVD case. I mean, from this side, you can't really tell. It looks good. You can't tell until you get close up that it's really not very good at all. Just like, not all my shelves are black. I didn't have enough shelves, so I took shelves from an old white shelf and I just put adhesive black paper on top. But that was years ago, so now it's lifting. And then there's like electrical tape along the front. From afar, you can't really tell. It looks good, but once you get close, you can tell it's all a scam. Lots and lots of Arthur C. Clarke. I love these old Signet copies that all look similar with the same style of livery. Unfortunately, a lot of my books are wrapped, so you get the glare, but yeah, I've got lots and lots of Arthur C. Clarke. Little figurine I got from the what is it, the Royal Tyrrell Museum in Alberta at the Dinosaur Museum. I might have got the name wrong, but that's where that came from. And then some Hal Clement, which he writes excellent hard SF, and like the kind of stories I like where there's a character stranded somewhere and they need to use science and physics to solve their problem. So we read and enjoyed the best of Hal Clement, Ira, Richard, and I. I think that was one of the first ones we read, maybe the first one. Since then, though, I've read lots. Natives of Space was a good collection that has a really good short story of first contact where these aliens are certain they've deceived this guy, but he gets the upper hand and it ends up he tricks them. It's a really good story. I think he's most known for Mission of Gravity and Starlight. Mission of Gravity, I think, is like a humanity crash lands on this planet. The gravity's so high, but these creatures they make contact with are able to help them or something. It's been a long time since I read it. But it was really good. And then Starlight's the sequel, but I have not read that. And yeah, just lots of other random stuff. This, I don't think anybody's ever heard of. I've only kept it for the bizarre, disturbing cover art. This is the Null Frequency Impulsor, which is also an epic title, worth keeping for that alone. But something about that art creeps me out. I will read that someday just to see what the hell is going on. Got some D.G. Compton, whom I have not read yet, other than probably short stories. Glenn Cook, known for the Black Brigade or Black Company stories, but this is a science fiction, I think space opera-ish series. Shadowline, Starfisher's Star's End. And it seems well received by certain people who are like Glenn Cook fans, like on Goodreads. I think people who stuck through with this really enjoyed it. It just sounds interesting. I've never heard anybody talk about these Glenn Cook books. Cookbook. And then we've got some Edmund Cooper. Seahorse in the Sky is one I want to read soon. I recently got this, just immaculate looking, aside from a sticker. It's like it's brand new. I think this is the one, yeah, about a bunch of people who wake up in like a Twilight Zone scenario where they just live on this street. They come out of coffins and they're just on this residential street. And I think that's the entire environment. Like, you can't go any further than that street. And they're trying to figure out why they're there. Sounds really good. I have read A Far Sunset, one of the first SF books I read. Think about a guy stranded on this planet, kind of becomes leader of this alien race or something. Very vague memories. And I think the aliens were basically humans, so not actually that great. I think I read The 10th Planet and hated it. And there was something else of his I read, but I don't remember now. Then Michael Coney, excellent literary SF writer. Kat Carina was really good. And then these two are in that series. I know I have more. It looks like something's missing. There's one or two others in this far, far future series of his. It's like he's throwing every trope you can think of into this far future. Seems really interesting, but I've only read Kat Carina so far. And some Michael Crichton. I've not read any Michael Crichton yet. Some Ray Cummings, who was writer in the early days. I don't really hear anybody talk about this guy, but that huge bunch of books I bought in Ottawa, mostly to resell, but I ended up keeping these. This is just a bunch of his ace books, and I've read enough older science fiction these days to know that you can't just write off these older obscure authors, because sometimes they become your new obsession. So I haven't read any Ray Cummings, but these all look like great old books with excellent cover art. Julie Zerneda, Canadian author. I read and enjoyed the first in a trilogy of hers, but I have that trilogy elsewhere, I think in hardcover, so it's not here at the moment. De Fontenay, this I've talked about before. This was written in the mid or late 1800s by a doctor, and it is a science fiction story. It's like a document is found from another planet that just describes the entire life and history of 3 different races that live on this planet, and how they built a spaceship and they went to their moon and there was life there too. And it was all written in the mid 1800s. It was really, really crazy. And then kind of rediscovered and republished in the 70s by Da. And then Miriam Allen DeFord, not well known, but she wrote for the science fiction magazines. I think she did a couple of anthologies too as editor. but Xenogenesis is a bunch of her stories. It's got to be a Richard Powers cover art. Feminist in theme sometimes, but really good. They're not all great, but I enjoyed these stories. Some Lester Del Rey, Best of Del Rey, which we haven't got to, the Best of Elsprague de Camp, which we have got to. Got an old Galaxy novel here. I don't have many of those, but I'll show a very cool signed one later when we get to it. And I've got just a bunch of Elsprague de Camp. He has that loose series that takes place in some far future. The books are somewhat connected, and I think they start here, go to about here. They're all in the same universe. And then just a bunch of his other stuff, as well as Delaney. I read Nova and did not like it at all, but it was so long ago. Everything I've heard about it since, it should be my kind of novel, so I'm going to reread that one day. Dahlgren I read before 2015 when I briefly went to college in Toronto in 2012. The student newspaper, somebody had written a review for this. And at this time, I've only read some Stephen King books. And I just thought, that sounds insane. So I bought a modern copy and I read it, and it was nonsensical. I don't think anybody really knows what the book is about, but it was still had me enthralled. Like it didn't take me as long as it probably would today to read it. It was bizarre. I was lost the whole time, but I enjoyed the trip. And Philip K. Dick, I recently came into a bunch of his books in nice condition. But when I bought them, part of the deal I made with myself is I'm going to have to sell half of them to make back some money. So I sold about 7 for, I think, $100. And I kept the rest. So we read the best of, and it convinced me that Philip K. Dick was amazing. Before then, I had only read a couple short stories and Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which I didn't care for, but I read that very early on. I think I've read enough science fiction now that I could go back and read that and get a lot more out of it. But yeah, I've got a lot of vintage copies of his stuff. Well, actually, I guess not. No, I don't. Not as much as I did, because I sold about half of them to make back some money. Thomas M. Dish. I read Camp Concentration recently, but it had too many references to things I knew nothing about to fully enjoy it, and too many like politics and religion and references I just knew nothing about. The first thing I read of his, though, hold on, I also read Echo Round His Bones, which was quite good. But the Genocides blew my mind, about post-apocalypse where seemingly some aliens have seeded the planet with giant plants and they just destroy everything. And there's only a few humans left, and there's little machines flying around trying to eliminate them. It seems the Earth has been turned into a garden for these aliens to harvest something they need, and the humans end up degrading. And it's really just a story about human degradation. And I've mentioned before, it's one of my favorites. It's an incredible book, but it is bleak, and the final scene haunts me. The final line is haunting and disturbing, although I can't remember it at the moment. But it's so bleak. I don't know if I could ever reread it because of certain themes that hit too close to home now, but I think about that book all the time. Susan Hayden Elgin, she wrote some literary SF, and this is one I really want to read, but it's the first in a trilogy, and I've got the first and the third. I need the rest. Some Harlan Ellison, Deathbird Stories. I sold a hardcover of this for about $100 a couple years ago. Time of the Eye. I've read a few Harlan Ellison short stories and don't really care for them. I read I Have No Mouth, But I Must Scream. And while I agree it's a really great story, I think it was so... it was almost lame at some points. Like, it could have been I say it could have been better written, but that's kind of a crazy thing to say about Ellison and one of his better stories. But I don't know. I had problems with that story and a couple of the others I read. So as a result, I haven't read much Ellison, and I tend to sell his books when I find them because they're often worth a little money. But I love the man himself. His rants on the internet about the injustices of the modern world in terms of publishing and stuff were really good. He had a segment on TV, and they're all online, and they're all great. And I've got a lot of Philip Jose Farmer. Well, there's also these stories, The Radio Beasts by Ralph Milne Farley. He wrote a few books about this radio planet or something. I want to read them, but I don't have all of them yet. But yeah, I've got lots of Philip Jose Farmer, who's been hit or miss for me. Actually, I got like an old beat up box set of the first few Riverworld books. And I read To Your Scattered Bodies Go. I liked it. The Fabulous Riverboat was just a race war with, you know, the building of it was about the building of a boat so they could travel this bizarre world, but it was really about a race war, and I didn't care. I was like, I don't get on with the story. I get it though. You take all of humanity and transplant them to a bizarre landscape, and we bring all our problems with us. But still, I couldn't care less about the race war or the racism. I just wanted to learn more about the world that we were in. And yeah, lots of Philip Jose Farmer. There's lots of his books I want to read. Someone this prolific, though, his books are going to be hit or miss. I'm trying to find... I'm not going to find it. There's one where people travel back in time to document, like, Neanderthals and stuff, and I would like to read that one. Time's Last Gift. That's what it is. So yeah, I've got a lot of those. Robert L. Forward, another guy who will blow your mind with hard SF. This is one of the greatest hard SF books you could ever read. If you're okay reading a lot of description and physics, but it's about alien life on like a neutron star or something, like these tiny little creatures that are smaller than your fingernail living in a high gravity environment. 67 billion times more gravity than Earth, and how their accelerated experience of time affects their interactions with us, how their whole generations fly by in a few minutes that our astronauts are talking to them. It blew my mind. He wrote a sequel, Starquake, which surprisingly, for a sequel to something so good, it was not terrible. It was good too. Glad he didn't continue with it. Don't think he did. There's the Chila there, these little guys. These little tiny microscopic guys with their shields and their swords. They were so cute too. The world building was really cool, and I still think about this one Chila character who died. And it breaks my heart still to think about that character and his death. I look forward to reading more Forward. I also read Camelot 30K. Now, what's cool about this was there was intelligent life, but they were like, they were like crabs or something. They were very, very small creatures, and humanity interacted with them by building tiny robots in the likeness of the alien creatures, and then controlling them by radio. And they learned the language. They totally communicated. They entered their cities, and they walked around. They kind of became little celebrities, all while piloting these little robots in this little alien city, and then uncovering a dark truth about the evolution of these creatures. Not as good as the other stuff, but still mind-blowing concepts. Yeah. And some C.S. Friedman, who, again, in my early days, 2015 or 16, I read In Conquest Born, and I loved this, but I've not read anything else by her since. This was about two warring factions of humanity. And back then in my ignorance, I got surface or contact paper or whatever, and I wrapped this to preserve, thinking I was preserving the cover. So that was probably 8 or 9 years ago, and it's not peeling off or anything yet, but there's no way it's going to last long. It's going to damage the book far more than it would otherwise have been. So I'm always looking for a mint condition copy of this, and I will reread it one day. There's a scene where this woman is on an alien world. It's like an ice world, or at least she's in the north or something, and she's crossing this frozen lake while there's a pack of these wolves following her, and it looks pretty bleak, and I think about that scene all the time. I've lost all context for the scene, but just the idea of being in the middle of a frozen lake, there's nowhere to go, and you're being hounded by these wolves. Raymond Galoon. So Ira, Richard, and I read the best of Raymond Galoon. I think it was Ira's pick. And if I recall, he figured, this is an obscure author, probably not going to be that great, let's get it out of the way. And all three of us were mind-blown. Raymond Galoon was ahead of his time. He, along with Stanley G. Weinbaum, were uplifting science fiction from pulpy stories about lasers and bug-eyed aliens, and making it more thoughtful, more realistic, more speculative, more based in reality. And Galoon was just amazing. Yeah, I love the guy. He didn't write a lot in terms of novels anyways. I have a few. There's the Eden Cycle and the Planet Strappers, and there might be 2 more he wrote later in his career, but his short stories are just excellent. And when we get to the hardcover shelf, I've got something else of his. The Best of Randall Garrett, I think, was a friend of, Silverberg. And lots of W. Michael Gear. I read a couple of his books we'll look at on the hardcover shelf that I really enjoyed. And Neuromancer. I think I read this twice. Read it too early. I hadn't read enough speculative fiction, so when I read this, I was like, what the hell's going on? How is this a bestseller? This is awful. But days after I read it, it stuck with me, and I thought, you know what? It was actually not bad. And then years later, I read it again, and it blew my mind. It is unbelievable. I will read this again and again in the future, I know. It's just so good. And I haven't read the Burning Chrome short stories. I know some of them are connected to that world. I did read Count Zero, and I liked that. I read that immediately after Neuromancer, the second time I read Neuromancer. But by then, it was too much. I needed a break, and I never got around to Mona Lisa Overdrive. And I would like to read all 3. I'm interested in the overarching story about potential contact with other intelligence, which I think is a pretty minor part of the story, but I do believe that's where the trilogy was heading. Gary Gibson. I've not heard anybody talk about him. He writes some good stories. I don't think he's writing much lately, but let me see here. I'm trying to remember. Jesus, my memory is awful. There, somewhere in here is a trilogy, and I just read it like 2 years ago, and I can't remember which books are the trilogy. Oh, it's these first 3. The Shoal trilogy. These were really good space opera, but I don't remember much about them. But since I've read them, I've had insomnia for 2 years, and yeah, but I know they were good. I loved them. Final Days is a standalone, and it was really good too. Angel Stations was a standalone, and it was also really good. The guy's a great writer, but I don't see many people talking about him, if ever. Kathleen Ann Goonan, Queen City Jazz. This is a really weird post-apocalypse story with this woman leaves her small community, travels downriver to this glorious city where I think there's an AI in charge, and it uses giant bees that leave this hive and travel the remnants of the world looking for information, and they bring it back to the AI or something. I might have that a little mixed up, but that's the gist of it, and it was really good. And this is a direct sequel. There's one of the bees there, Mississippi Blues, which I have not read. So if I want to read that, I'll have to read Queen City Jazz again. and a couple other of her books. I think one of these is related to those, but not too much. William Golding's The Inheritors. To me, that sounds fascinating. I can't wait to read that. I think it's about primitive man and Neanderthals and wiping out the Neanderthals, basically. Here's an egg my nephew painted for me in 2023. Or more likely, my sister painted it for him. Across the Zodiac, the story of a wrecked record. Deciphered, translated, and edited by Percy Gregg. I just want to check this. I think this might be another one of those books that was written incredibly early. It says 1978, so maybe not. I might be thinking of something else, or it just doesn't have the proper information. Might not be the book I was thinking of, but it's one that sounds interesting. Maybe it was written in 1880. I'm not going to take the time to figure it out, because this will be a long video as it is. I've got Colin Greenland's Seasons of Plenty, which is a sequel to his Take Back Plenty, which was a great space opera, but that is on the hardcover shelf. Nicola Griffith, Ammonite. I think that's about a mining colony or something where all the men die out or something, or some planet where only women can live. Something about the planet kills off men. Or that's the plot to one of her other books. I don't know. I haven't read her yet, but she has a few books that sound really good to me. Then we've got some James Gunn. Joe Haldeman's The Forever War was one of the first books I read in 2015. And it blew my mind. It introduced me to the concept of, well, what you could do with relativity, and how you could, if you travel near the speed of light, how basically when you come back, you've traveled into the future. And that idea really blew my mind. And I read it around the same time as Revelation Space by Alistair Reynolds, which has multiple narratives that take place decades apart from one another. And I kept thinking, how are any of these related? But sure enough, all the characters end up traveling, and they end up in the same place at the same time, despite their stories taking place decades apart. So within a short period of time, I read 2 books where relativity was played with, and time travel basically worked. It's a poor way of putting it, but I loved that idea that, you can travel near speed of light or hang out near a black hole and just travel into the future. I think that really attributed to my instant love of science fiction. Peter Hamilton, I haven't read a lot of his. I read 1 or 2 of these and I wasn't into them, but I did read this duology, Pandora's Star and Judas Unchained, and I loved it, but it was so long. I think this is the one with the prologue about an alien creature on its own planet that ends up basically dominating its own planet just through evolution and learning how to outsmart creatures of its own kind. And the prologue alone is worth reading. And again, in this book, there's an alien creature that's almost left for dead, and it says something like, "Don't leave me behind." And I think about that all the time. It crushes my heart because I really came to like the creature, but I think he lived. So after that, I collected a lot of his stuff, but really haven't read much. I did read Light Chaser, which he wrote with Gareth Powell, and I loved it, but I could not tell you a thing about it to save my life now. Just because I probably read that in a day, just a short novella. Edmund Hamilton, who he can be hit or miss too, because he wrote some great stuff, but then he seemingly just kind of wrote for the pulps, whatever they wanted to make money kind of thing, just to get by. So some of his stuff is not too good, but some of his short stories are incredible. And I think I have, something of his to show off later, which is kind of neat. And yeah, some Harry Harrison. Haven't read much of him, but I certainly have a bunch. M. John Harrison's The Centauri Device, another one of those really popular older space operas that I read too early, and I was confused, didn't like it, but I suspect if I reread it, I would absolutely love it. Another book that will absolutely blow your mind. This was a gift from Richard at Vintage SF when we did a book trade a couple years ago. The Paradox Men. This, I could not begin to explain it now. You could read the little synopsis, which isn't going to tell you much, but just know that a genius wrote this, and it will blow your mind. It is just incredible. And it was written quite early on. I'm not going to open it up to find out when it was written, but I look forward to reading more by him. I don't think any of his other stuff, of which I have a few books here, will come close to what he achieved in The Paradox Men, but just know that he's worth checking out. And then I have some Heinlein here, but I have like another 40 of his books in a box because I just don't want to take up all the space with a bunch of books from one author. Dune, which I've never read. I might just not ever read it. There's too much hype. I'm so subconsciously, it seems, against anything that's too popular. Like I don't like Star Trek, Star Wars. Dune got too big and it just turned me off, but I should probably read such a landmark book in the genre one day. William Hope Hodgins' The Nightland. I look forward to checking that out sometime, but I'm more interested in his weird stuff like Karnacki, The Ghost Finder. Check that out. You're trying to sell a book, right? And that's what you choose to put on the cover? Can you imagine some kid asking his mom back in the 70s if she'd buy this for him? And then most of all, I think I want to read The House on the Borderland, which is a really weird story. I think these are... I was going to say these are the only books by E. Hoffman Price, but they're not. He wrote some other stuff that's not necessarily science fiction. I don't think these are going to be anything special. They're a space opera. But E. Hoffman Price, I think I read, was like the only guy to meet Robert Howard, Clark Ashton Smith, and H.P. Lovecraft, which is pretty crazy. He wrote for the Pulps. I haven't read anything by him, but I want to check him out. He seemed like an interesting guy if you read up on him. James P. Hogan, I've read a couple of his short stories, and I read the prologue in Life of the Codemaker, which was really, really good. And the late, great Sean Standfast loved Hogan, recommended him to me many times, so I will get around to checking him out. Earthwind by Robert Holdstock is not the book that I meant to talk about, so we'll hold off on him till we get to the hardcovers. And I've got a decent amount of Fred Hoyle, famous scientist and author. John Jakes. This series I haven't heard anybody talk about. Simon Rack, New Life for Old by Lawrence James. These are UK Sphere copies, I think, but they have really cool... Oh, see, that's number 1, so these have been mixed up at some point. Really cool cover art. Like, look at that. That's incredible. Wow. Really, really cool. About, I guess, a character named Simon Rack. Let's just see. Are these 70s? Are they reprints from older? Looks like they're 1970s. That's cool. I look forward to getting into those. K.W. Jeter. I don't have Blackadder. I do have Blackadder on DVD, thank you. I don't have Dr. Adder, his better known book. I do have Noir, which is a crime noir story, which sounds really good and is a much more modern book. Neil R. Jones was he from New York or New Jersey? Somewhere around there. I think he's buried in New York. He wrote in the 30s, he wrote about these he wrote lots of these stories about these robots called the Zoromes. And Professor Jamison, who is not the last human necessarily, but he had his arrangements made that his corpse would be put in a ship or a capsule and would orbit Earth. And so when these Zorams come by Earth, millions of years after humanity is extinct, they find his preserved body, bring his brain to life, and put it in one of their own robot bodies, which is what they do. They travel around, they find intelligent species. If anyone wants to join them, they put the brain of that species representative in one of their robot bodies, and now they're all Zorams. They travel around, they solve mysteries, they save other races. They're very simple, repetitive stories, but they're very fun. I absolutely love them. And in the 70s, Ace put out these 5 collections, which collects about 90% of the stories. They're really fun, and I built a little Lego guy to represent them, and wherever they are on the shelf, the little Lego guy ends up. Lots of other stuff. Rogue Golem, the only book written by this guy, Ernest M. Kenyon, although I think he wrote a manual on some sort of engine or something. This is a really weird Android story. It's not the best written, but the prologue is almost seemingly nothing related to the book at all. It's like a far future thing, and it instantly hooked me. I picked it up because it's signed and it's just so obscure. I read it, and I wouldn't say it was good, but I was hooked. It was like watching a 70s thriller, like 3 Days of the Concorde or whatever. I can't think of the name of that movie now, but that's what it felt like. It's a 70s time capsule, and it's signed by the guy. It's the only book he wrote, so I kept it. I did read all the Dark Tower books, but I'm not taking up space with them, so just the Gunslingers on there. And I've read The Stand, Vincent King. I've had his book Time Snake and Super Clown a couple times, but since it always sells for $50, I never keep it. I always sell it. So I have Candyman, which I once started, and it was so nuts, I just wasn't in the mood for that. So I haven't read any Vincent King yet, but I do have Light a Last Candle, Quatermass in the Pit. That was a gift from Seth, who is a viewer and commenter who's far more knowledgeable than me, and sent me a box of books once. So lots of his books are on the shelf. I have lots of Kornbluth here, which are not in the best of condition, but I do love C.M. Kornbluth. Some books from Nancy Kress. I don't think I've read anything by Nancy Kress yet. Kuttner, lots of Kuttner and Moore. I love Henry Kuttner and C.L. Moore. I'm a little obsessed with C.L. Moore. Reading her letters between herself and H.P. Lovecraft were amazing. So I got lots of books between the two of them. The Best of Kuttner there, which I also have in the book club. The only R.A. Lafferty I have is 900 Grandmothers. Not sure how I'm going to get along with that author. I believe Arthur Landis, this guy only wrote these 4 or 5 books about a world called Camelot, which I believe is like a medieval world where magic works. So in the first book, people show up on a spaceship from Earth or something, and when they get down there, it's all like magic. I think that's the only thing that this guy wrote, and I've got them all. Some Lammer. What's this? Oh, Anne Leckie's trilogy. Ancillary, Justice, and all that, which I think I read all 3. Again, I read those early on. Those are challenging if you're new to speculative fiction, and I was. I would like to reread those. You know what? It looks like I only read the first one. Some Ursula K. Le Guin. I think this is the first place where Cannon's World was, unless that was in a magazine first. So I've got a bunch of, well, not a bunch, but a decent little amount of Le Guin. Kind of a unique copy of The Left-Handed Darkness, which I read and pretty much hated. But again, I was picking all the landmark, challenging books to read as a newcomer to science fiction. So something I should reread someday. And then we get on to Liber, the first of the Fafhrd and Grey Mouser Sword and Sorcerer stories. I've only read one short story, and it was recently, and I loved it. So I very much look forward to reading the stories of those guys. So we're on the last shelf on this wall, and then we're gonna do these two, and then there's two more in terms of paperbacks. Then we've got the hardcovers. Okay, so yeah, I've got all the Fafhrd Grey Mouser stuff. The Best of Liber is there. Then we get on to some Leinster, the Best of Leinster. He wrote some stories. I don't think they're all collected here, but these like doctors or surgeons in space or something, which I'm very curious about. Really interesting cover art. Look at that. I want to check that out. I want to read more Leinster. He was another guy who doing some good things for science fiction back in the day, writing some different stories and kind of changing the trajectory. I've got some Stanislaw Lem, but not a lot of it's in good condition. The Invincible is the only novel of his I've read, and I did enjoy it. It was bleak, and I liked it. Still need to read Solaris. Mountains of the Sun is a French translation, or a French book that was translated. It was okay. It was about humanity leaving Earth and then coming back from Mars 100 years later and interacting with some primitive humanity. Is this some Doris Lessing? She may be too literary for me. I'm not even sure if these books make sense to be in an SF library from what I know of her. I think I have all but one in whatever series that is. And some C.S. Lewis. The Charles Harness Paradox Men is in a series called SF Master Series. I haven't found many of these from New English Library, but here's one, and it seems to be they take little-known books and republish them. So this is The Strange Invaders from Alan Lellin, and I believe this was written quite early. Like, this book would be from the 70s, and the story must be considerably older to be considered an old masterwork that needs to be remembered. We've got some Barry Longear. I read and loved, what was it? Is it not even here? Was it Manifest Destiny, maybe? I think so. I look forward to his circus series. I got the trilogy there. And a couple other things. Some Lovecraft. I haven't read much Lovecraft, which is bizarre when you come to realize you love weird fiction, but I read Clark Ashton Smith first and became obsessed with him. So I've got plenty of H.P. Lovecraft to read over the years. Eric Van Lustbader series. Ken MacLeod, some like hard SF and space opera. Julie May. Richard Matheson's The Shrinking Man. I really want to read that. The only Ken MacLeod I've read, I think, was 400 Billion Stars. And it was awesome, but it was so long ago I don't remember much of it. But people landing on an alien planet, and there's a weird race of creatures that lives in this like volcano-like mountain thing. Vague memories. It was kind of a challenging read, but I still think about it, and that must have been close to 10 years ago. Was that? Oh, that was Paul Macaulay. Sorry, that was not Ken MacLeod. And it was really good, and it's not the only Paul Macaulay I've read. I also read Fairyland, which again was challenging, and I was confused at times as to what was going on, but it was really good, and I would like to reread it. It's about like this engineered doll who maybe gains more sentience than she should have or something, and I don't know, life gets weird, or reality gets weird. Somebody else who has read that could explain it far better than myself. Jack McDevitt, I like him. I read, where is it? Pretty much his whole series with, starts with the Engines of God with the pilot Priscilla Hutchins, I think her name is. And they find remnants of alien civilizations, but I don't think they ever find living... Oh, they do find living aliens in the most recent book. But so I read all of these. This is all part of a series involving the pilot of a spacecraft named Priscilla Hutchins. And they're good. Sometimes the alien creatures they find are a little too human-like. Most of the time it's just finding remains on some planet, and you can tell that the alien race was human-like. But the most recent of those books, I believe, was The Long Sunset, and it was written a lot more recently, and it was not nearly as good as the other stuff. The aliens they find are just, they're far too human-like. And then there's a prequel novel, which I don't have because I don't care. Ian McDonald, another person I need to check out. Got some Vonda McIntyre. And some Judith Merrill, which I was thinking of reading soon, since I was just at her library, her amazing collection of stuff. But I don't have much, as you can see, this collection of short stories. Okay, so is it... Well, it says it's stories, but there's chapters, so I don't know. I'll have to look into that. China Miéville. Again, one of my favorite contemporary authors, but I haven't read much of his stuff. I mean, Embassy Town is supposed to be incredibly good linguistic novel, but I haven't read it. Rail Sea is kind of like a young adult, and it was pretty good. King Rat is like an urban fantasy, and it was really good. I think this is the only book I ever convinced my sister to read. Or maybe she only borrowed it and gave it back. I can't remember. No, you know what? She read an Emma Newman book, Planetfall. And then she borrowed this, but she never read it. Canticle for Leibowitz. Got some Michael Moorcock on the shelf, but a lot of it's boxed up. C.L. Moore. I love her. She is the greatest. Jarella Jory, Northwest Smith stories, they're so good. I absolutely love those stories, and The Best of C.L. Moore had tons of good stuff. And I actually just noticed an error here. Daryl Moore from BookTube, he has his own YouTube channel that's really good. He sent me this book. You can see my crazy annotations. He's a great writer. This was a bunch of short stories that are interconnected, Tau Salandis, and I really liked that. But I just noticed it's slightly out of order. It should be after the C.L. Moore. But yeah, I don't think there's any other masterworks of hers yet anyways. If there was, I'd scoop them up. John Morrissey. I recently read a book of his and really liked it. He has some weird space operas that are interconnected, so I've slowly been collecting those. Linda Nagata, I read a novel of hers and really liked it. It's called Field of Vision or something like that. It had vision in the title, so I've been collecting her books. And then we get to Larry Niven, who takes up a lot of space. I do like Larry Niven. I have all those Del Reys that they put out in the same style. 3 copies of Ringworld, which I've read twice, but it's just an okay book. It's not... It has its problems. And then the further Ringworld books just kind of deteriorate, in my opinion. I tried to read it. I think I got as far as the 3rd one, and why is everybody having sex? Why are we not learning more about the world? And since then, I've collected a lot of Larry Niven. I'm trying to find a specific book that is absolutely gorgeous. Co-written here, The Flying Sorcerers. This Corgi edition is amazing. It's like a science fantasy. It's a funny, humorous book with lots of nods and Easter eggs to other authors. Just in pretty much every character in here is named after a classic science fiction author. And he keeps up for a bit. There's the book, the only book I ever got my sister to read. I really liked that one. I read After Atlas immediately after, and I read Before Mars as well. Don't really remember them, and never got on to the other one. And I believe this series is continued, but I don't have it. Something I've never heard anybody else talk about. One of the first videos I ever put on YouTube close to 6 years ago was about Tristan Palmgren's Quietus, which is like an alternate history where in the 1300s, during the Black Plague, a monk questioning his faith and trying to avoid contracting and dying from the plague gets mixed up with some humans from another dimension who are fighting a multi-dimensional war with like powerful AIs or something. It's incredible. I did convince one person, Seth, viewer and commenter, to read this, and he enjoyed it. I thought this was incredible, and I periodically check on this guy every now and then to see if he's writing anything else, but I don't think he really has. He did write a sequel, Terminus. I've read this twice. I read this once. This was good too. Kind of picks up where this left off with some of the same characters. But our monk is vastly changed. I don't think I liked where she went with that, or he went with that, but Quietus is just an incredible book, especially if you like history, because you get to kind of live in 1300s Italy and Europe for a while. And his hard SF and his space opera themes are really good. His characterization is really good. Buy these books and read them. John Rackham, where is he here? I can't see. John Rackham, he also wrote under the pen name Philippant. I believe the books he thought were his best were written under his actual name. I've read The Anything Tree, which was pretty good. King of Argent was good. I read that in Toronto recently. So I try to find his stuff. He didn't write a lot, but you got to look up 2 different names to track his stuff down. H. Beam Piper, still haven't read anything by him, but I've got a lot of his stuff that it's all kind of interconnected in his future history. Doris Pichercha, her stuff, if you know of her, you know it's weird. It's pretty hit or miss. I don't think I would ever love anything of hers, but Earth and Twilight was okay. Earthchild I liked, but it certainly was weird and incomprehensible at times. We get down to the great Frederick Pohl, who I look forward to reading lots of his stuff. I haven't read any of his novels, just the best of and other short stories. I DNF'd Man Plus, oddly. I just wasn't in the mood for it at the time, though. And he wrote a lot with Kornbluth. Probably I need to get around to reading Gateway. And, you know, as far into that series as I can get. There's another copy of The Way the Future Was, which is a kind of science fiction history and a reference book. So lots by him. A couple Fletcher Pratts, which kind of sound interesting to me. Robert Reed's Morrow, which is expanded from a short story or novella he wrote that I thought was incredible. But this giant spherical spaceship the size of a moon that humanity finds. And it kind of just pilots around the galaxy, and they're living on it. There's other creatures living on it. They're using it to explore the galaxy, but they're also exploring its inner depths because it's so huge. And at the center of it, I won't spoil it, but they find something fascinating at the center of the craft. So I bought the novel, and he wrote a series. So I think this is part of that. I don't know how many books there are, but I've got 1 and I'm not sure which one this is in the series, and then a few of his other books. And then we get to Mike Resnick. I've talked about Birthright of Man, or Birthright, the Book of Man, a lot of times. It's a bunch of short stories about humanity reaching the stars, becoming part of a galactic federation with other species, becoming the head of the Federation, then resented and hated by the Federation, and hunted down and exterminated by the other races of the galaxy. It's our rise and fall. It does take place in his massive interconnected future history. Most of these stories are like gunslingers and bounty hunters, but in space. Like Santiago, I've read, is part of that. But a lot of these are also one-offs or like weird series. I haven't really heard anybody talk about these, but they're so bizarre. And yeah, I've got a lot of his books. And then probably my favorite contemporary author, guy who got me hooked, Alistair Reynolds, and the book that did it, Revelation Space. I bought most of these new in store. This was part of the haul I bought with Forever War. I bought a bunch of books, brand new. Maybe I can put the picture up if I haven't already. That was one of them, and it blew my mind. I went out and bought more. House of Suns also blew my mind. I've read Revelation Space, I think, 3 times. But my memory is so poor. Like, this is probably one of my favorite fictional universes, but I could tell you very little. Despite having read Revelation Space 3 times, I always forget what the hell's going on, who's who, and stuff. But for contemporary SF from the year 2000 and on, as when he started publishing novels, really, really good hard SF, space opera stuff. This trilogy I don't think was as well received as some of his other stuff, but I loved it. Slow Bullets is good. Century Reign is an incredible novel that reads like an alternate history. You're in 1930s France and the future at the same time, but also you're not. You have to read it to find out what the hell's going on, and it is an incredible, like, noir detective story with high-tech space opera elements. This was a good book. Crashing Heaven was really good, cyberpunkish book. Waking Hell is the sequel, but I haven't read it. But I've really not heard anybody talk about these. Some Keith Roberts. I want to read The Furies. So Kim Stanley Robinson. I've read several of his books. Short Sharp Shock, Ice Hinge, Red Mars, Aurora, which I have in hardcover. Probably my favorite book of his is not science fiction. It's Shaman, about primitive man just trying to survive. Probably around 20,000 years ago. There's still Neanderthals around, which these guys refer to as the old ones or something. It's just speculation on life, the life of primitive hunter-gatherers in, like, Europe 10,000 years ago. It was really good. There's a scene there I think about all the time. One guy in that tribe wants to see where the world ends, so he just starts walking in a straight line. And he shows up 15 years later, and he's like, yeah, it just keeps going. There's no end. The world is endless. So I turned around and I came back. I thought that was incredible, because undoubtedly throughout history, many people have done that and come to the same conclusion. And that's the end of this shelf. No, it's not. We're down here. The Best of Eric Frank Russell. Took me a couple years to finally find that. That was the last best of I needed. Ship of Fools from Richard Paul Rousseau is a dark kind of horror SF. The main character is, I think he's handicapped, which was really cool, and it made for an interesting character. So Fred Sagerhagen, I haven't read much of, if anything, of his. So Pamela Sargent, I want to read. And Robert Sawyer's Hominids. what is the title of this series? I can't remember now. Something Parallax. Neanderthal, Parallax. I love that trilogy. Basically local to me author. Yeah, I've read several of his books and liked them all. So we'll take a quick break from the tour just to go over a couple things here. I framed this analog that has, I think it's called The Searcher by James H. Schmidt. It's one of my favorite Schmidt stories. Humanity accidentally takes something they find in space, and it turns out it's a vital component of this like ethereal creature. So the creature finds the planet it's on and terrorizes the people. And there's, of course, with James H. Schmidt, there's like 2 secret agents who are undercover, and they're trying to solve this mystery without blowing their own cover, which is like every one of his stories. They're so good. The Borderland of Soul, I really liked this Niven story. I couldn't tell you a thing about it anymore, but I think it took place in his No One Space series, and I really liked it, and I really liked the cover art, so I framed it. And my adorable child. And then I haven't done much with this space. I don't really know what to do with it. There's just random stuff here, but some cool stuff. This 54 copy of Universe had a Starman Come Home novel of Edmund Hamilton's, which was nothing special, but I love the cover art. I read it, kept it. It was part of that haul of magazines I bought with intending to sell, but they have a smell to them, so I just bagged it. Can't really sell it. Another James H. Schmidt story I loved, Beacon to Elsewhere. This was a really good story, and again, it had the cover art, so I put it there. Chessboard Planet, this is a Galaxy novel by Kuttner and Moore. I got in Toronto. It was saran wrapped with the cover on it, and it said as is, so I knew it was damaged. So I bought it, and I just left it for a couple weeks, and when I finally opened it, the cover fell off, so I was pretty disappointed until I realized it was signed by Moore. And I could not figure out, and I tried with the help of friends and family to decipher who this is to. Somebody Wolf. We couldn't figure it out. And it was just last week I sent the picture to Google Gemini and asked the AI, and it's like, oh, that's Bongo Wolf, who is an eccentric figure in like 1960s California, I think. He carried around bongo drums. He wore porcelain vampire teeth, and he wanted to be a werewolf. And he loved weird fiction and science fiction, and he got books signed, and he carried them around in his bag that people called the bongo bag or something. So I was thrilled to find something signed to C.L. Moore, but to find the fact that it's signed to another interesting character. I read online that for a short period of time you could buy a poster of Bongo Wolf, but he was just an eccentric character. I still haven't sat down at the computer and really researched him, but it just made the magazine even more exciting to have. And I saw on eBay there's other stuff signed to him. There's a book from James Cameron signed, and a couple other books signed to him that you can buy on eBay. They're listed for hundreds of dollars. I don't know if they ever sell for that, but I will not be selling a book signed by C.L. Moore because I love her. And this other magazine, it's just a fantastic, I haven't read it, don't know anything about the story or the author, but I just love the cover art. It's just really, really good. What year is this? 1955, August. And then I put out a video about these. This is a near complete run of laser books edited by Roger Elwood. Notoriously badly written books because the constraints the authors were under. They're not that great. They're not really worth much. It's just neat to have almost all of them. I think I'm short by like 3. So I'll keep them. Chances are I'll eventually sell them. But they're neat to have, and they look great lined up. Then over here, I've got a stack of books which are new but haven't been in a book haul yet. So some anthologies and a rough copy of Van Vo's The Winged Man. So we continue with the Robert Sawyer. I just recently found these 2 short story collections of his. And then some other stuff. I read Starplex a couple of years ago, which was good. John Scalzi. I had a lot of his books, but didn't really like anything other than the Old Man War books. And even the other Old Man Universe books I got rid of. So these are all I kept. Then James H. Schmitz, I've just been talking about. I don't really need any of these books because everything's collected here from Baen, but you tend to keep books you don't need when they're by some of your favorite authors. A lot of his stories are connected. I put out a video, I'll try to remember to link it, a couple years ago, talking about, and I'm very proud of the video too, using a lot of images I found online and just kind of narrating what the universe is about, this future history of his. There's always these spies and these high-tech secret agents keeping humanity safe from rogue aliens and rogue people with telepathic powers. And he only wrote 2 novels, or 3, sorry. The Demon Breed kind of takes place in that universe, I think so. Legacy does, and there are short stories directly connected to it. It features Trigger Argy, which is one of his characters from his short stories, although she doesn't look like that. So that's why I have a copy of Legacy. It was also titled A Tale of Two Clocks, so if you can believe it, this is the same book, despite the size. It was first published as A Tale of Two Clocks, which is a better, more relevant title. And then he also wrote The Witches of Karis, which is an unrelated novel. And I guess some people, I think, is this a novel or an anthology related to it? So I stuck it there. But yeah, I have all the short stories collected from Baen, and I've read them all, except for Eternal Frontier, which is, I think, unrelated short stories to anything. It's just a bunch of short stories. So once I read that, I'll have read everything in James Smith's other than this standalone novel. And Carl Schroeder, a Toronto author. I've read 3 of his books, if you count this novella, which I forget what this is related to. It's related to one of the novels of his I read. And then Bob Shaw, a recent obsession of mine. I had read him before, but it wasn't until recently I read some of his stuff and really loved it. I had read Orbitsville in the past, but I recently read, and I'd read Medusa's Children. I read Nightwalk, and I loved it. I read A Wreath of Stars, and I loved it. And Palace of Eternity I read, and it was just brilliant. So Bob Shaw, to me, kind of like Silverberg, except less time wasted on sex scenes. But really, really good stuff. Niftaline, this is incredible, like sword and sorcery type stuff. This copy, in this condition, easily sells for $100. It's so hard to find, especially now that booktube is a thing and people who've come across this, like myself, will rant about how great it is. There's 2 or 3 other books about this character, and they're equally as hard and as expensive to find. I would love to read more stories about this character. This is one of the best things I've ever read, and it's just a shame I can't find the other Michael Shea books of the Nift character for anything under like $70, $90. And that's just not doable. I got a lot of Robert Sheckley. I've only read his short stories, which are quite good. I'm looking forward to reading the Victim books, which are related to one of his short stories. Probably the favorite of mine I've read so far. It's called The 7th Victim or The 10th Victim or something. And the novels take place in the same universe. Charles Sheffield, I read a bunch of his books early on and loved them. But almost everything I read of his was from his Heritage universe. So, again, I'm looking at this and something's not right. There's a book missing. So these might not be in the correct order, but the Heritage books start with Summertide, about a guy who's basically Han Solo. His name is Hans Rebka. He's a troubleshooter. He drives a spaceship around. He solves problems, but he's also good with a gun and one-liners. And I think this was like a one-off story. It was about like 2 planets that orbit each other, and there was going to be a catastrophic event due to the gravity and stuff, and he was supposed to try and help save the people. But then it turned into a series, and there's just these large, dumb objects left by a super powerful, advanced race from the past, and there's no sign of them left alive, but humanity's constantly finding these weird artifacts and trying to learn more about them, and it's like lighthearted space opera with some comedy between the characters and the comedic antagonists, really. So I say I love Sheffield, but 90% of what I read is all from this one series right here. But that hasn't stopped me from collecting a ton of his stuff. Yeah, we'll keep going. We've got The Purple Cloud from MP Shield, which was written in 1901, I believe, or maybe a couple years before that. Really good Last Man story. When we were at the Merrill collection at the Toronto Public Library, the librarian mentioned this, and I couldn't believe it. I'm like, yeah, it's like 130 years old. I just read it. What are the chances? Frontera by Louis Shiner is really good, bleak story on Mars. That was a recommendation of Steve, the Outlaw Booksellers, and it was really good. And John Shirley's City Come A-Walkin' was kind of like a proto cyberpunk, but with some urban fantasy elements, and it was also very good. There's nothing like this. This is a one-of-a-kind, really bizarre, really good book. And then we get to one of my other obsessions, Robert Silverberg. Don't need to say much about him. If you're watching a tour of Vintage SF, I'm sure you're aware of Robert Silverberg. I try to pick up any book of his I don't have when I see it. And I've read a lot. The Man in the Maze was the first one I read that really blew my mind. I loved it. Tower of Glass was really good. I also put out a video on that, just reading from the book with some images to accompany it. Trying to get across just how epic it made me feel when I read certain passages. And then the Hyperion books, which I loved, but I never finished. I didn't read the next two. I'd love to reread these sometime. Joan Selinsky, not well known, I don't think, but we'll get to the hardcovers. One of her books is one of my favorites. And there's some really good stuff here. I just started here. The first of my Clark Ashton Smith mass market paperbacks. One of my favorites, Clark Ashton Smith, another author that just blew my mind with his Dying Earth stories or his bizarre science fiction stories. Clark Ashton Smith was one of the big three, the weird movement, I guess. And there's nobody like this guy. When we were at a used bookstore in Toronto 2 days ago called The Scribe, someone overheard one of the staff saying they believe a letter was just dropped off or just sold to them or traded to them or something, allegedly from H.P. Lovecraft to Clark Ashton Smith, which I would have loved to see. That would have been the highlight of the whole day if I could have saw that, because those are worth a lot of money and they're very rare and just a really cool part of history. And right beside Clark Ashton Smith is another one of the greats that blew my mind, Cornwainer Smith. His stories are like, they read like fables, far future. A lot of these are interconnected, and we'll see them in when we get to the hardcovers too. But Cornwainer Smith's stories are incredible. Another writer where you can easily say there's nothing else like what he's writing. Some Spinrad, bunch of Brian Stableford, whom another author I love. His books from the 70s and 80s are great. Recently passed away, and he was a critic and kind of like a historian as well for science fiction. All right, we're on to the last two shelves. I have a lot of Stableford. His stuff is great. Olaf Stapleton, talking about having your mind blown, reading, where is it here, Star Maker, and realizing it was written in the 30s It's incredible. There's no plot. It's the evolution of reality. It's really good. And then the chapter that was cut out and then published posthumously, Nebula Maker, about a bunch of like sentient nebulas and their entire life cycles and relationships with one another, was also really good. And I'm reading the only thing I've ever come across that's anywhere close to that, which is Ross Rockland's The Sun Destroyers, which is about sentient star-like creatures and their lives. And that was written in the 40s. It's 4 short stories written in different periods of the 40s, collected in that ace. John Steakley only wrote 2 books. One called Armor, which I would love to get my hands on, and one called Vampires. And Vampires is spelled with a $sign because they're like bounty hunters that go after vampires for money. Turned into a not great movie, I've heard. I will not watch the movie, at least until I've read the book. One of my all-time favorites from, 1941? Sometime in the 40s, Earth Abides. One of the only books that ever made me cry. And just an incredible ending, an incredible story. All the more better because of when it was written. It's a beautiful book. And that's all I'll say. Oh, here's one not many people talk about. Heroes Die, a fantasy novel by Matthew Woodring Stover. It's not a fantasy novel. It's a science fiction novel. A world is found in another dimension, and it's basically a fantasy world. And high-tech, basically gamers, they're not gamers, but people strap into these machines and project their consciousness into a body on that world and inhabit that body and become characters in that world. And the whole thing is televised. And these people from Earth playing these characters are life and death stakes and playing with the lives of actual citizens on this planet. And the ruler of this planet is like a god. And when the god realizes that people from another dimension are interfering, he decides, or it decides, I want access to this other dimension. I want access to Earth. I want to learn all about Earth. It's mind-blowing. Nobody ever talks about this. This is an incredible book. There's more in the series, but they're probably not as good. This is a case of just an incredible opening book to a series. I would love to reread that someday when I'm willing to reread something that's massive like that. Got some Strugatsky. Oh, that's a sturgeon. I was going to say, I don't recall a Da Strugatsky in my collection. Yes, lots of sturgeon. And of course, Adrian Tchaikovsky. Children of Time, I think, was the first of his I read, and I quite enjoyed it. So I've been reading his books over the years. Alien Clay was all right. Cage of Souls was quite good, but near the end, he just threw every idea he could possibly think of in there and kind of negatively affected my opinion of it, but it's still good. Elder Race was really good. Made Things was really neat, about sentient puppets in kind of a medieval world. Yeah, still lots of his new to me that I need to read. There's that trilogy by William Tedford I mentioned earlier. I have a poster about these, and then he wrote another science fiction book called Silent Galaxy, which had some incredible ideas about basically all of humanity just being the universe wanting to experience itself, and we're actually all part of the same consciousness or something. It was really good. Got some James Tiptree Jr. The Color of Distance by Amy Thompson. It's a recommendation from Seth. I read and really enjoyed that. And then there's a sequel, which I have not read. Tatiana Tolstaya, The Slinks. I don't remember when this was written, but this is not science fiction. It's not really fantasy. It's kind of both, but it's a bizarre bizarre book, 2003. I'll just pan down if you want to read the synopsis. I'm sure some people will read this and decide they need to track it down. It's certainly a weird one. Lots of Jack Vance, old Dawes. Love Jack Vance stuff. Haven't read nearly enough. And Van Vogt, who I think is always going to be hit or miss for me. I'm either going to really enjoy his stuff, or sometimes he just meanders and goes in weird directions and the story kind of falls apart for me. There's another one of those master series books. Borderline by Vercors. I believe that was written quite a long time ago, and then at some point in the 70s, New English Library republished it. Probably my all-time favorite hard SF novel, A Fire Upon the Deep, which I famously DNF'd 2 or 3 times before something clicked, and I read it start to finish and thought it was absolutely incredible. The sequel, which is actually a prequel and barely related in any way, is good, but too long. Joan Vinge, I've loved and enjoyed some of her stuff, like The Winter Queen, and some of her short stories are just excellent in the Eyes of Amber collection. And the Outcasts of Heaven Belt, which some places online say is in the same universe as her ex-husband's series that I just mentioned, but there's really no connection whatsoever. This is the same thing, actually. Yeah. Metropolis by Thea von Harbaugh. I want to... what came first, the novel or the movie? I still haven't seen the movie. Then the super dark, like sword and sorcery, maybe grimdark, is that appropriate for these? Carl Wagner's character, what's his name, Kane. These are so dark, but so damn good. Some Ian Watson, Peter Watts. I'm looking at Peter Watts books. Why do I not see... I guess they're on the hardcover shelf. We'll get there. The Best of Stanley G. Weinbaum, who Asimov said would have been probably the biggest name in science fiction had he not have died in 1935 or maybe 36. Only wrote for a year and a half and completely changed the trajectory of science fiction. And I have read The Black Flame, which was 2 stories put together to make a novel, and they were really good. Some James White, this large Paul O. Williams series. I'm still 1 book short. Walter John Williams, got a lot of his stuff. I need to read Hardwired, which is kind of like a well-regarded early-ish cyberpunk. Got the best of Jack Williamson. Some Robert Charles Wilson, Toronto author. Absolutely loved his stuff. Spin, first in a trilogy, but Spin on its own is just an excellent novel. I loved it. Colin Wilson's bizarre Spider World books. These were weird. Post-apocalypse, something from space caused plant life and spiders and other insects to become huge. So humanity lives in like the ruins and underground and stuff, and there's giant bugs running around. And it, I don't know, the main character ends up having some kind of power over them or something. They were good but bizarre. And he wrote them based on a bet with another famous author. Author wanted him, said, I bet you can't write a children's book. And this was his response. So I would say that guy was right. Colin Wilson cannot write a children's book because this is not for kids. Got some Gene Wolfe. Lots of John Wyndham, who I still haven't read, but I have probably close to everything, I would think. Got lots of his books there. And George Zabrowski, who his short stories are just incredible. The guy writes better than most. I think he should be better known. I have read his novels. This is a trilogy I read early on, and I liked it. I don't know if it's that great if I were to read it again, because I read that early on, like 11 years ago. And some Zelazny. And just a few more to round it out. And that is the end of the paperbacks, which just leaves like a shelf and a half of hardcovers. Got the usual Aldous, Anderson, Asimov. Kind of some interesting Asimovs, though. There's Extraterrestrial Civilizations, which is just a non-fiction speculations. The Foundation books in Book Club, which is how I read them. It's kind of a neat book club of Fantastic Voyage. Almost everything on here has been wrapped by me in a Brodart dust jacket. I recently ran out of them, which is the only reason any of these aren't wrapped. Greg Bear's Blood Music, which might be my favorite, other than Aeon. Blood Music blew me away. Really great and disturbing book. Some James Blish, Ben Bova, John Boyd, who's really only known for his novel, The Last Starship from Earth or something. But check out the cover art on that, the Oregon Bank Farm. I mentioned these earlier. Hefner Press did, I think, 4 of these, but they're crazy expensive other than this one. Collections of Lee Brackett stories. This is Shannock the Last, Farewell to Mars. There she is there. Really nice book, epic collection. All right, what else do we got? A Nesfa Press of Frederick Brown. I think that is everything. Yeah, complete short SF. I mentioned Sue Burke's novel Semiosis. There's the sequel. Got some more C.J. Cherry. These all have great cover art for this trilogy. And they're all wraparound, too. I have a lot of C.J. Cherry book club editions. Most of these I have in paperback. So Arthur C. Clarke. I really like this book club of Childhood at End, even though it's so simple. Rendezvous with Rama is pretty sharp looking, too. L. Sprague de Camp, PKD, Second Variety is the title of the collection, but it's also one of my favorite short stories of his. Then we've got these amazing Stephen R. Donaldson books, the cover art, I mean. The Chronicles of Thomas Covenant are, you either love it or hate it kind of thing. I got each of these first 3 books for $1 each. And I read the trilogy and I quite liked it. Aside from the main character, he's the worst character to ever spend any time with. It drives you crazy, but I did like them. Second trilogy was okay. And I had the next 4 books, the next series, and I just decided there's no way I'm ever going to read those, so I got rid of them. And then there's the one chapter that was cut out of, I think, the Illith War, and it's like illustrated, so I got that separately. This was like a print on demand because I craved more Raymond Gloon. It's just a cheap copy. And The Children of Ages. This was a gift sent to me from the YouTuber and author himself, Gamey Builds. He builds realistic science fiction dioramas, and then he writes stories about them. Those are not going to fit well. One of my all-time favorite novels. I just posted about this on Instagram recently. Stargate by Pauline Gedge. Nothing to do with Stargate, the franchise. It's a beautiful, heartbreaking fantasy science fiction. Some W. Michael Gear science fiction, time travel, alternate history involving, it was either the Aztecs or the Maya. It was really cool. Another copy of Neuromancer. I think this is like a anniversary edition? 10th anniversary edition of the novel. Carolyn Ives Gilman. I haven't heard much about her. I don't think she's written any books, but she has done a lot of short stories, I think. Dark Orbit was a pretty good book. Take Back Plenty. I had some problems with this popular space opera, but it did have some memorable characters like this guy. And the book is just gorgeous, so I think that's a book club probably. And more Charles L. Harness. I was very lucky to find these at a thrift store in Alberta. Just a bunch of his stories. Those are from Nespa Press, as is the Zana Henderson. I mentioned this earlier. Robert Holdstock. I loved this novel. I had a paperback, and then I had to get some neat hardcover of it because it was so good. Where Time Winds Blow, in a strange planet where things disappear and other things just show up out of nowhere, and scientists are trying to figure out if they're from the past, the future, if they even exist at all. It's really good. The Complete Conan, of which I've only read one Conan story so far, but I'll get there. C.M. Kornbluth, the complete short stories from Nespa Press. That's pretty cool. Fury by Kuttner, one of his better known works. This is an old hardcover, which is, the book is in fine condition, like it's not falling apart or anything, but the dust jacket was brutal. But I wrapped it in a Brodart jacket, and now it's fine. Jeffrey Landis writes some hard SF. I have this story collection. Very much looking forward to checking him out sometime. I've only read a couple short stories. Then we've got Sterling Lanner, The Hero Destine. These two stories. The third was never written, although there's rumors that his daughters may be writing it or something. Got some Le Guin book clubs, which are always nice. Again, like, that was falling apart, but now it's good. Love this Fritz Leiber book club, The Spectres Haunting Texas. It's great artistic rendition of a guy from the moon struggling with Earth's gravity. Another wonderful Nespa Press. This is the Essential Murray Leinster with cover art from Exploration Party or Exploration Team. I can't remember the name, but it's one of those. It's the title of the story, and it's a really good story, and it's illustrated here. Got some Stanislaw Lim. I have another copy of this that's in better condition for sale on eBay with another hardcover Lim. The Three Body Problem. I read and enjoyed both of these. I never did get around to the third. That was years ago. These book clubs of Julian May's series are gorgeous. And this is a cyberpunk I haven't got to yet. Moving on. Probably my favorite novel ever, Perdido Street Station. Ironically, my favorite novel is not science fiction. Again, I read this, I think I read this before 2015, and I read it off my TV screen from a PDF, and it blew my mind. So I had to track down a paperback. I read it on paperback, and then I had to track down a first edition, which again was not cheap, but there it is. I love the world of New Crobuzon, even though it's a disturbing, terrible, filthy, oppressive place. Love that first edition cover art. And then the somewhat connected sequel, The Scar, also a first edition. And the third in the series, not quite as good as the other two, Iron Council. And I don't think many people know this. This novella, The Census Taker, I don't remember much about what this is other than a kid living in an isolated house and a census taker coming by or something. There are plenty of hints in this to suggest it takes place in the world of New Crobuzon. So, kind of an Easter egg. You read that and you go, holy shit, this is like a fourth book in the series. It's pretty cool. I mentioned John Morrissey earlier. This is the book of his I read that I really enjoyed and I wanted to track down more. Here's a fourth copy of Ringworld I have. It was rough shape, but I wrapped it. It's just bizarre. Just the weirdest cover art. These Nibbins actually have great cover art. Especially Limits. Got these awesome Nesva Press collections of Chad Oliver. They did 3 collections. I've got 2. So I've got From Other Shores, which is an omnibus of 3 or 4 of his novels, which I read and enjoyed. All of them, I think. And Far From Home, or Far From This Earth, is short stories. Anthropological science fiction, usually. Another Pachercha. Edgar Allan Poe. I was happy to find this at a library sale because I haven't read very much Poe at all. And then some Frederick Pohl. Got a rough copy of The Inverted World from Christopher Priest. And then the hardcover Alistair Reynolds books I mentioned. He's my favorite contemporary science fiction author. This was like a limited edition from Subterranean Press, which is really cool. Readable Works of Art. Your book was packed by Emmy. So this is a short story collection. Signed, copy 138, 1,500 copies. And there's a few of these. If we look here. What was I going to say here? Inhibitor Phase, one of his more recent books, is hopefully not the conclusion to Revelation Space. I don't remember much about it because, as I always say, my memory is terrible, but it left on quite the cliffhanger, but there was some hope for the universe, I believe. We've got more of these kind of rarer books. Not exactly rare, but harder to find. This is Nesva Press collection. Short stories. And then more Subterranean Press limited editions. This is 6 Directions of Space, which is like really interesting space opera. This one, 1,000 copies. Minla's Flowers and 1,000th Night. It's like a double. That's signed and limited, but I don't think it says how many there were. And 1,000th Night is takes place in the same world as his novel House of Suns. And then Troika. All of these I had to track down online. I'm not sure how many of these there were, but that one's not signed. All right, Kim Stanley Robinson's Aurora. I remember buying that new and reading it, the struggles of a generation ship and having a totally closed environment, self-sustaining, and how it's basically impossible. It kind of crushes your soul for the hope of traveling far distances. So, lots of Fred Saberhagen, Fritz Leiber, which is in the wrong spot. That's what happens when you're constantly moving books around. But those are, I believe, the Fafhrd and Grey Mouser stories. One's a book club, this one. It's the first 3, and I think this is the next 3 stories. It's just not a book club. And some R.A. Salvatore, some of the early stuff I read, the Legend of Drizzt stuff. I mean, I only read the first few novels, never read the other stuff, but... Then the hardcovers move on to here. I found this in Toronto at rereading. This is the only Gnome Press book I've ever found. Agent of Vega by James H. Smits. Pretty cool. I know Richard from Vintage SF just found one. It's his first Gnome Press. And then the two of us found a third one together at, I think it was at The Scribe in Toronto. So very bizarre. Got some Carl Schroeder here. This is a short story collection. And then Ventus and Permanence, which are 2 unrelated space operas that are incredibly good. Some of the best stuff I've ever read. Some Daryl Schweitzer, I think print on demand stuff. I read his We Are All Legends, which is kind of like C.L. Moore's Jarell of Jory, but it's a male character and he's a hell of a lot less capable than Jarell. I was talking about Charles Sheffield, his heritage books that start with Summertide. I have a first edition hardcover. And a collection of short stories. I think Georgia on My Mind is a short story that won a Hugo or something. And M.P. Scheel, he wrote The Purple Cloud. This is The Lord of the Sea. Silverberg, World's Fair 1992. This is a little water damaged, but it's signed. I found that at a thrift store for like $4. A few more Silverbergs. These 2 ancient, terrible condition Avalon books from David Osborne is a pseudonym. They're actually Silverberg. And they are not in the best of shape. Then some more Clark Ashton Smith. Nightshade Books put out a 5-volume set of everything. So really, you only need these 5 books. I'm missing volume 2. For some reason, it's far more expensive on Amazon than all the rest. But, you know, I love his stuff, so I've got lots of different special, cool things. This is the Book of Hyperborea I got on eBay from Germany. It's Hyperborea Stories, which I recently read. Hippocampus is putting out different collections of his books, as well as their Blu-ray of the documentary on Clark Ashton Smith, which I have, and it's incredible. This is something I can't wait to check out. Stories or letters between Lovecraft and Clark Ashton Smith. And like I said earlier, potentially such a letter was found or delivered or dropped off or sold to or traded to the bookstore we were in just a couple days ago, which blows my mind. Cordwainer Smith Nesfa books. This is all his science fiction right here in just these 2 books. His novel Australia and all of the books in his future history, plus the few short stories that weren't part of it are in at the back. Beautiful books. And some book clubs of the Lensman stuff from Smith. I mentioned Joan Slinsky earlier. A Door into Ocean. It's like a very literary, feminist, awesome book about 2 cultures clashing. And this is the sequel, which I have not read. Got some Spinrad, some more Stableford. This is supposed to be a very good vampire book. The Empire of Fear. Check that out. Beautiful. And George R. Stewart, I mentioned he wrote Earth Abides, which is an absolutely beautiful, heartbreaking post-apocalypse book. I've got a couple of first editions of his other stuff, which I have not read. Dracula, which I only just read earlier this year, the end of last year maybe, and I quite enjoyed it. Vacuum Flowers from Michael Swanwick is a bizarre cyberpunk not a lot of people have read or talk about. That's a book club edition. Yeah, John Varley's Gaia trilogy I really enjoyed, and the book club is pretty cool. Where is it? You know what? I might have been thinking about the paperback, which has an awesome illustration, but those books were good. I like those. Got a Nesva Press of A.E. Van Vogt, The Essential Stuff. It's full of stuff, but I've only read, I think, The Black Destroyer, which was, you know, a very important story in the history of science fiction and a turning point. And the last shelf, we've got The Snow Queen I mentioned from Joan Virginji. I loved that book when I read that many years ago, and this, I believe, is a first edition. A Deepness in the Sky, which is the prequel to A Fire Upon the Deep, which is okay, just a bit too long. And then, like I said, A Fire Upon the Deep absolutely blew my mind. I had to track down the first edition, which I may sell because who really cares, right? I mean, if I can sell it, make some money, and still have the paperback, I might eventually. And then the third book in the series, which picks up right where this left off, I have not read this yet, but I suspect it'd be probably better to reread A Fire Upon the Deep before I get there. And yeah, short story collection. Peter Watt's Blind Sight, which really is a challenging read, but it'll absolutely blow your mind. It is disturbing. If you read the synopsis, it doesn't read anything like what the book is. It might turn you off, but it is challenging, hard SF, kind of change the way you think about reality or what it means to be conscious or sentient. And that's, you know, that's pretty much it. Colin Wilson's The Space Vampires, which is a really bizarre novel. He wrote those spider books I was talking about. This was weird, really, really weird. I put out a long, rambling video talking about it. I don't put out many videos talking about specific books, but I did for that. And then just a lot of Robert Charles Wilson. These were the two sequels to Spin, which are good. Blind Lake was great. Short story collection. The Harvest was really good. Kind of reminded me of Stephen King's The Stand. Darwinia I loved. And I haven't read Mysterium. Some Gene Wolfe. Chelsea Quinn Yarbo's False Dawn, which was a very, very bleak post-apocalypse novel. It was terribly dark, and I absolutely loved it. I almost turned around and just reread it right after finishing, which I've never done ever with any book. And we end with some Zelazny. And that's it. I've been wanting to do that for a while. Since the shelves were nice, this room's arranged, finally. But that's it. Thanks for watching, and as always, we will see you in the next one.